My name is Charlene Williams, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be betrayed by my own son. As a retired elementary school teacher, I thought I had seen it all, but nothing prepared me for that fateful dinner at Thomas and Amanda's house last spring. I had spent hours baking my special apple pie, hoping to bring a little sweetness to our family gathering. Instead, between the main course and dessert, my daughter-in-law Amanda dropped a bombshell that shattered my world. Before I continue this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to join our community of real-life stories. Life before that terrible dinner had been relatively peaceful, if a bit lonely. After dedicating 40 years of my life to teaching third graders at Lincoln Elementary, I had settled into retirement with my husband John, looking forward to golden years filled with travel gardening and spending time with our only son, Thomas, and his family. Those dreams shifted dramatically when John passed away from a sudden heart attack 3 years ago. We had been married for 42 years, and his absence left a gaping hole in my life. Our family home suddenly felt too large, too empty, too full of ghosts and memories. 6 months after his funeral, I made the difficult decision to downsize, selling our 3-bedroom colonial and moving to a smaller single-story house in the same town. It was just the right size for me and my orange tabby cat Marmalade, with a modest but beautiful garden that gave me purpose during those first difficult months of widowhood. Despite the challenges that came with aging, I prided myself on maintaining my independence. Yes, my arthritis made some mornings difficult, and yes, sometimes I moved a bit slower than I used to, but my mind remained sharp. I still drove myself to weekly bridge games, volunteered at the library twice a month, and managed all my own affairs. John had left me financially comfortable, not wealthy by any means, but with enough savings and pension income to live without worry. Our small town of Mapleton had everything I needed within a 10-minute drive. Thomas had been my pride and joy from the moment he was born. As a child, he had been sensitive and thoughtful, always drawing pictures for my classroom, or helping his father in the garage. He inherited John's height and my love of books, excelling in school, and eventually becoming an architect with a successful firm in the city, about 40 minutes from Mapleton. I had been so proud watching him walk across the stage at his college graduation, the first in our family to earn a degree. For years after he established his career, Thomas would call me every Sunday evening like clockwork. We would chat about his projects, my garden, and everything in between. That changed gradually after he married Amanda 7 years ago. The calls became less frequent, sometimes skipped entirely, and when we did speak, Thomas seemed distracted, always in a rush. Amanda Matthews was from a wealthy family in Connecticut, a fact she managed to weave into nearly every conversation. When Thomas first introduced us, she had been perfectly pleasant, complimenting my home and asking thoughtful questions about family photos. She worked in luxury real estate, with the polished appearance her profession demanded, perfectly highlighted blonde hair, designer clothes, and a dazzling smile that sometimes didn't quite reach her eyes. Over time, I noticed small signs of Amanda's controlling nature that I chose to overlook for Thomas's sake. The way she would interrupt him mid-sentence, her subtle criticisms of his clothing choices, her dismissive tone when he shared ideas she didn't agree with. But Thomas seemed happy enough, and it wasn't my place to interfere in their marriage. When they announced they were expecting twins, I was overjoyed, hoping grandparenthood would bring us closer again. Lucy and Jake were born 10 years ago, beautiful, healthy babies that instantly captured my heart. I offered to help as much as possible in those early days, but Amanda preferred to rely on her mother and paid help. Still, I treasured the moments I was permitted to spend with them, reading stories and slipping them extra cookies when Amanda wasn't looking. As the twins grew older, I tried to establish regular contact through small gestures. I baked their favorite treats, remembered their interests, helped with school projects, and attended every recital or game I was told about, though I sometimes learned about events after they had already happened. 4 months ago, Thomas called to suggest we establish a regular family dinner tradition every third Sunday of the month at their house. I was thrilled by the invitation, seeing it as an opportunity to strengthen our bonds and be more present in my grandchildren's lives. Those first few dinners had gone reasonably well, despite Amanda's tendency to dominate conversations with stories of her real estate successes and the accomplishments of her wealthy clients. The week before that fateful dinner, Thomas called with the usual reminder. Something in his voice sounded strained, a tension I couldn't quite place. When I asked if everything was all right, he quickly assured me that all was well, just work pressure. He mentioned almost as an afterthought that Amanda wanted to discuss something important during dinner. Thinking it might be a special occasion, I spent the day before the dinner baking my special apple pie, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. The twins had always loved it, and I hoped it might create a moment of connection in what had become increasingly stilted family gatherings. I also purchased small gifts for Lucy and Jake, nothing extravagant, just a new fantasy book for Lucy and a model airplane kit for Jake. As I prepared for the dinner, I felt genuinely hopeful. Perhaps this would be the turning point in our relationship. Perhaps Amanda had finally warmed to me. Perhaps Thomas had recognized the distance growing between us and wanted to bridge it. With my apple pie carefully packed and gifts wrapped in cheerful paper, I drove to their house with optimism in my heart, completely unprepared for what awaited me. Thomas and Amanda's house stood like a fortress in their affluent neighborhood, a sprawling two-story Tudor with perfectly manicured landscaping that always made me feel slightly intimidated. My modest rancher, with its cheerful but imperfect garden, seemed to belong to an entirely different world. I parked my 10-year-old sedan beside Amanda's gleaming luxury SUV and gathered my offerings before making my way to their imposing front door. Amanda answered my knock, her smile tight, and her eyes already evaluating my simple dress and cardigan. "Charlene," she said, air kissing near my cheeks, "you're right on time." No warmth, no mom, just my first name spoken with the same tone she might use with service providers. Thomas appeared behind her, giving me a genuine but nervous hug. "Hi, Mom. Glad you could make it." His eyes darted between me and Amanda, and he seemed to be standing straighter than usual, as if bracing himself. Grammy Jake's voice called out as he bounded down the stairs, his sister following more sedately behind him. For a moment my heart lifted as my grandson threw his arms around my waist. But before I could properly return the hug, Amanda intervened. "Jake, careful with Grammy's back. You know she's getting fragile." Her voice carried a warning that made Jake step back immediately. I wanted to protest that my back was perfectly fine, but Amanda was already ushering us toward the living room. Both grandchildren had electronic tablets in their hands, eyes glued to screens. When I asked about school and their activities, their responses were distracted, monosyllabic. 3 months ago, Jake had talked enthusiastically about his science project for 20 minutes straight. Today, he barely looked up. "Lucy, how is your piano coming along? I would love to hear you play something before dinner," I suggested, remembering how she had once enjoyed performing for family. Before Lucy could answer, Amanda interjected. "Lucy has so much homework these days. AP classes are demanding. Besides, she's focusing more on debate team now. Piano was just a phase." Lucy's eyes flicked briefly to her mother, then back to her tablet. I placed the apple pie on the kitchen counter, and Amanda's expression soured. "Oh, you brought dessert. You should have mentioned it. I already ordered a cheesecake from that gourmet bakery downtown." She slid my pie unceremoniously into the refrigerator where it would remain forgotten. As I helped set the dining table with Amanda's expensive china and crystal glasses, I couldn't help noticing how she hovered nearby, as if afraid I might break something. These plates were a wedding gift from my parents, she informed me for perhaps the 5th time, from their trip to Italy. Hand-painted, one of a kind. The seating arrangement felt deliberate in its subtle cruelty. Thomas sat at one end of the rectangular table, Amanda at the other. The twins were placed on one side, while I sat alone on the opposite side, the furthest possible position from my son. The physical distance seemed to mirror the emotional gulf that had been widening between us. Dinner conversation remained firmly under Amanda's control, dominated by stories of her latest high-end property listing and the famous client, she couldn't name, but heavily implied, was a film star. When I attempted to share news about my friend Susan's daughter graduating medical school, Amanda nodded distractedly before turning to Thomas. "Honey, did I tell you about the Henderson estate? The one with the private lake access?" And just like that, my contribution to the conversation evaporated. Between the main course and dessert, Amanda tapped her crystal water glass with a silver spoon, drawing everyone's attention. Before we have dessert, I wanted to discuss some changes coming to our family. Her tone was businesslike, reminiscent of her real estate presentations. Thomas and I have been thinking a lot about proper care for aging relatives. My stomach tightened instantly. Something in her phrasing, the way Thomas suddenly became intensely interested in the remaining food on his plate, sent warning signals through my body. It's something all responsible families need to address. Amanda continued, her eyes not quite meeting mine. We've been researching the best options. Thomas reached for his wine glass, his third refill of the evening. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead, despite the cool temperature of the dining room. When Amanda gave him a pointed look, he cleared his throat. It's important to be proactive about these things, Mom. Amanda stood and left the room briefly, returning with what looked like brochures and a folder. The twins exchanged confused glances, sensing the growing tension. Jake opened his mouth as if to speak, but a sharp glance from his mother silenced him. Throughout the meal, I had noticed Thomas and Amanda exchanging whispers when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Now, as Amanda laid out papers on the cleared section of the table, Thomas's discomfort was palpable. He refilled his wine glass yet again, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I've been doing extensive research, Amanda said, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of her sales pitches. Given recent developments, we need to discuss the next phase of Charlene's living situation. My confusion must have shown on my face. Recent developments? I'm not sure what you mean, Amanda. She smiled tightly. Thomas has noticed things during his visits. The unopened mail. The slight burn mark on your kitchen counter. The way you sometimes search for words. These so-called concerns were easily explained. The unopened mail was just advertisements I hadn't bothered with. The small burn mark happened when my oven mitt slipped once while removing a baking sheet. And everyone sometimes pauses to find the right word, especially when interrupted mid-thought, as Amanda frequently did to me. But before I could offer these explanations, Amanda continued, her voice taking on a tone one might use with a child. It's nothing to be ashamed of, Charlene. Aging happens to everyone. The important thing is having a plan. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, twirling the stem of his wine glass between his fingers. His eyes met mine briefly, then darted away. Whatever was coming, my son was complicit but ashamed. The realization sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the dining room temperature. Amanda waited until the housekeeper had cleared the dinner plates before delivering the blow. The timing seemed calculated, positioning her announcement between our main course and the dessert I would never get to taste. She squared her shoulders and looked directly at me for perhaps the first time that evening. This is your last dinner here. You're moving into a nursing home. Her voice was firm, matter-of-fact, as if announcing a business transaction rather than uprooting someone's life. The words hung in the air like poisonous gas. I felt my lungs constrict, my heart racing abnormally fast. For a moment I wondered if I had misheard or misunderstood. I don't understand, I said finally, my voice smaller than I intended. Amanda slid one of the brochures across the table. Sunny Pines Retirement Community. It's the best facility within 50 miles. Private rooms, daily activities, 24-hour nursing care. She spoke as if offering me a luxury vacation rather than institutional living. We've already scheduled a tour for tomorrow morning, she continued briskly. Thomas has signed the initial paperwork. We can have you moved in by next week. My eyes darted to Thomas, who was now intensely studying the pattern on the tablecloth. Thomas? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. He looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and manufactured concern. It's for your own good, Mom. We've been worried. Worried about what I asked, genuinely confused. I'm perfectly capable of living independently. Amanda shook her head, her expression one of practiced patience. Thomas has power of attorney now. He signed the papers 3 months ago when you were having those memory issues. This was the first I'd heard of any memory issues or power of attorney. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed this information. My mind flashed back to my own mother's final years, how I had cared for her in my home until her passing, the promise I had made that she would never see the inside of a nursing facility. I had assumed my son would offer me the same dignity. We're planning to sell your house, Amanda continued, shuffling through papers. The proceeds will cover Sunny Pines for about 4 years. After that, we'll need to reassess. Silent tears tracked down my cheeks, but I maintained my composure. Years of classroom management, having taught me the importance of dignity under pressure. I noticed Jake staring at me, his young face contorted with concern. "What about my garden? My things, Marmalade?" I asked, thinking of my beloved cat, who had been my constant companion since John's death. Thomas finally spoke up, his words slightly slurred from the wine. "We've already sold some of the furniture and older jewelry pieces. Things you don't really use anymore." The casual admission that they had been in my house, going through my possessions, selling my belongings without permission, felt like a physical blow. I thought of John's mother's ring, wondering if it was among the older jewelry pieces they had decided I didn't need. "You had no right," I whispered. "Actually," Amanda interjected, "Thomas has every right. The power of attorney gives him full control of your assets. It's all perfectly legal." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We're just looking out for your best interests, Charlene." "What about Marmalade?" I asked again, thinking of my sweet orange cat. Amanda waved dismissively. "No pets allowed at Sunny Pines. The animal shelter can take it." "Him," I corrected automatically. "Marmalade is a him, not an it." Lucy, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "But Grammy loves Marmalade. You can't take her cat away." Her voice trembled with emotion. "Lucy, this is adult business," Amanda snapped. "Charlene is showing signs of cognitive decline. The doctor Thomas spoke with was very clear about the importance of professional supervision." "What doctor?" I asked, alarmed. "I haven't seen any doctor about cognitive decline." Thomas swirled his wine glass, not meeting my eyes. "Dr. Winters. Amanda's cousin. He reviewed your case." "My case? He's never met me." The injustice of it burned through my shock. "Grammy isn't confused," Jake said firmly. "She remembers all our birthdays and helps with my math homework. That's more than you do, Mom." Amanda's face tightened. "Jake, go to your room right now." "But Mom," Jake protested. Now Amanda's voice left no room for argument. Jake threw his napkin down and stormed away from the table. Lucy, after a moment of hesitation and a sympathetic glance in my direction, followed her brother upstairs. Once the children were gone, Amanda's demeanor became even more clinical. She pulled out floor plans of Sunny Pines, showing the tiny single room that would become my entire world. She had already selected the few personal items I would be allowed to bring, mainly clothes and toiletries. My books, my photo albums, my gardening tools, my keepsakes, all deemed unnecessary. "We've created a timeline," she said, pulling out yet another document. "The movers come on Tuesday. We'll have an estate sale the following weekend for everything else." The calculated efficiency with which they had planned my institutional incarceration was breathtaking. As Amanda rattled off more details, I noticed Thomas becoming increasingly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat, and refilling his wine glass yet again. But discomfort wasn't the same as disagreement. Whatever qualms he might have had, my son had chosen his wife's plan over his mother's autonomy. "We should discuss your jewelry," Amanda said, eyeing the simple pearl necklace John had given me on our 30th anniversary. "You won't need most of it at Sunny Pines. Costume jewelry would be more appropriate for a facility setting." I touched the pearls reflexively, feeling the smooth, cool surface against my fingertips. Another piece of John, another memory they wanted to take from me. The enormity of their betrayal expanded with each new detail Amanda shared. This wasn't just about my living arrangements. This was about erasing me, diminishing me, converting me from person to problem, from mother to burden. And my own son was allowing it to happen. As Amanda continued outlining the details of my institutional future, a strange clarity washed over me. The shock receded, replaced by an almost detached analytical ability. I recognized what was happening now. This wasn't about my welfare. Not really. This was about my assets. My house, though modest, sat on a quarter-acre lot in a now desirable neighborhood. Property values had tripled since John and I purchased it decades ago. My cognitive decline provided the perfect pretext for Amanda to gain control of a valuable asset. I remembered my friend Dorothy, whose stepchildren had done something similar 3 years ago, manufacturing concerns about her ability to live independently, in order to access her savings. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I had raised, but a man I barely recognized. The Thomas I knew would never have participated in such a scheme. This Thomas, with his averted eyes and wineglass clutch, had surrendered his integrity along with his backbone. "What happens to my house after you sell it?" I asked quietly. Thomas glanced at Amanda, who answered smoothly, "We'll use the proceeds for your care, of course." "All of the proceeds?" I pressed. Amanda's hesitation was brief but telling. "Well, there will likely be excess funds after the initial deposit at Sunny Pines. We thought we might convert it to a rental property, generate some ongoing income to supplement your care costs." "How convenient," I said softly. Thomas flinched at my tone. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to do what's best." "For whom?" I asked. "For you," Amanda interjected, her practiced patience slipping. "You'll thank us later, Charlene. Many seniors find great community in retirement facilities." "I have a community," I responded. "My neighbors, my garden club, my book group, my volunteer work at the library." Amanda rolled her eyes slightly. "Those aren't real relationships, Charlene. They're superficial activities. At Sunny Pines, you'll have professional caregivers. Paid staff aren't family," I said quietly. "Well, we can't all put our lives on hold to watch you decline." Amanda snapped, her mask of concern finally cracking. "Thomas has a career. The twins have their activities. I have my business. We can't be checking on you every day wondering if you've left the stove on or fallen in the shower." "I've never asked you to put your lives on hold," I replied. "I've never asked you for anything." "That's not entirely true, is it?" Amanda's tone turned condescending. "You're always asking Thomas to fix things around your house, the leaky faucet last month, the porch step before that." "I offered to hire a handyman," I reminded her. "Thomas insisted on helping." "Because he feels obligated." Amanda's voice rose slightly. "That's the point, Charlene. You make him feel guilty and he feels compelled to help you, which takes time away from his actual family." Her words, "actual family," struck like a physical blow. In Amanda's world, I was an outsider, not truly family at all. Thomas made a half-hearted attempt to soften his wife's cruelty. "What Amanda means is that we're concerned about your safety living alone. We love you, Mom." But his words rang hollow against the background of their actions, their secret planning, their disposal of my possessions without my knowledge or consent. Amanda, perhaps sensing she'd revealed too much of her true feelings, attempted to redirect the conversation to more practical matters. "The garden at Sunny Pines is quite lovely, though of course you won't be doing the actual gardening yourself. They have staff for that." "What about my garden?" I asked. "The roses John and I planted on our 25th anniversary. The memorial tree for my parents." "The new owners will probably rip all that out," Amanda said, with a dismissive wave. "Most buyers these days want low-maintenance landscaping. Probably put in a patio, maybe a hot tub." I pictured strangers tearing out the rose bushes. John and I had tended for years, cutting down the flowering dogwood planted in memory of my parents, destroying the garden that had been my solace after becoming a widow. Something inside me began to harden. "And what about Marmalade?" I asked again. "I already told you no pets at Sunny Pines." Amanda sighed dramatically. "The animal shelter is the most humane option, though at his age I doubt anyone will adopt him." She actually laughed after this statement, a small dismissive chuckle that became the final breaking point. In that moment, something shifted permanently in my relationship with my son and his wife. I looked at Amanda with her perfect highlights and designer dress, and saw not a daughter-in-law but an adversary. I looked at Thomas Wine, flushed and evasive, and saw not my beloved son, but a conspirator against my independence. With a calmness that surprised even me, I placed my napkin on the table, stood up and picked up my purse. I looked each of them in the eye, my gaze lingering longest on Thomas. "I believe this dinner is over," I said quietly. "Mom, don't be dramatic," Thomas began, but I was already walking toward the door. "Charlene, you're just proving our point with this behavior," Amanda called after me. "This emotional instability is exactly why you need supervision." I didn't respond to either of them. With deliberate movements, I retrieved my untouched apple pie from the refrigerator, holding it carefully as I walked out the front door without another word. In my car parked at the end of their perfect driveway, the composure I had maintained finally cracked. Tears flowed freely as I gripped the steering wheel, my whole body shaking with silent sobs. Not just for the betrayal I had experienced tonight, but for the death of the relationship I thought I had with my son. My phone rang the screen showing my neighbor Susan's name. I had promised to call her after dinner, to let her know how it went. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Charlene, is everything okay? You usually don't answer so quickly after these dinners." Susan's concerned voice came through the speaker. "No," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Everything is not okay." As I pulled away from my son's house, the pie sitting on the passenger seat beside me, I made a decision. I would not be a passive victim in this scenario. I would not quietly submit to Amanda's plans. I had spent decades teaching children to stand up for themselves, to use their voices. Now it was time to follow my own teaching. I spent that night at Susan's house too shaken to be alone. After sharing the entire sordid story, we sat at her kitchen table with cups of tea, strategizing until well past midnight. Susan, a retired nurse with a no-nonsense attitude, immediately recognized the financial motivation behind Amanda's plan. "This is elder abuse, plain and simple," she declared, already making a list of people to contact, "and I'm not letting them get away with it." My first call was to Patricia Reynolds, a lawyer friend who had retired the same year I had. Though it was nearly 11 at night, she answered on the third ring and listened intently to my situation. "Do you have the power of attorney document they claim you signed?" she asked. "No, this is the first I've heard of it," I admitted. "Then we need to move quickly," Patricia said firmly. "First thing tomorrow, we need to secure your accounts and documents. If Thomas truly has power of attorney, we need to see that paperwork and determine if it's legitimate. Meet me at my house at 7:30, and we'll go from there." Sleep eluded me that night as I mentally inventoried my important documents and assets. John and I had always been methodical about our paperwork, keeping our will insurance policies and financial information in a clearly labeled accordion file in my home office. Had Thomas taken that too, I couldn't remember seeing it during my last desk cleaning. In the dark hours of early morning, I wrote out a step-by-step plan in Susan's floral notepaper. First, secure my financial accounts. Second, protect my legal rights. Third, safeguard my remaining possessions. Fourth, establish boundaries with Thomas and Amanda. Fifth, build a support network for moving forward. Patricia was waiting on her porch when Susan dropped me off the next morning, a thermos of coffee and her briefcase ready. "We'll start with your bank," she said by way of greeting. "If Thomas has been accessing your accounts, we need documentation of all transactions." The bank manager's expression grew increasingly concerned as I explained the situation. He pulled up my accounts, confirming my fears. Thomas had indeed accessed my savings account 3 times in the past month, withdrawing a total of $5,000. "These were in branch withdrawals," the manager noted, "authorized with a power of attorney document we have on file." "May I see this document?" Patricia asked. When the manager returned with a copy, my stomach clenched. There was my signature dated 3 months earlier, granting Thomas full financial power of attorney, except I had no memory of signing such a document. Patricia studied it closely. "Charlene, is this your signature?" I examined it carefully. "It looks like mine, but I never signed this. I would remember something this important." "When was the last time you signed anything for Thomas?" she asked. I thought back. He brought over some birthday cards for relatives about 3 months ago, asked me to sign them while he fixed my porch step. He had several cards stacked together. Patricia and the bank manager exchanged knowing looks. "We need to file fraud paperwork immediately," Patricia said, "and place a freeze on all accounts." The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and legal maneuvers. By 10 o'clock that morning, I had frozen all my bank accounts, filed fraud reports for the unauthorized withdrawals, revoked any and all powers of attorney, opened new accounts at a different bank, placed my important documents in Patricia's safekeeping, filed a police report regarding the sale of my possessions without consent. Next step, Patricia announced as we left the police station, is securing your house and remaining belongings. If they've been selling things already, they likely have a key. Susan's son Michael, a locksmith, met us at my house before noon. He quickly changed all the locks and installed a simple security system with motion-detecting cameras at the front and back doors. "I'll link this to an app on your phone, Mrs. Williams," he explained. "You'll get alerts if anyone approaches your doors." Inside, I discovered drawers had been rifled through, and several valuable items were indeed missing: John's watch collection, my grandmother's silver service, and most painfully, the jewelry box containing family heirlooms meant for future generations. The sight of my violated home brought fresh tears but also strengthened my resolve. Patricia helped me document everything that appeared to be missing, taking photographs of empty spaces where items had been. Susan called several of our mutual friends from the neighborhood, and soon a small army of concerned seniors was at my house, helping me secure remaining valuables and offering support. Margaret from 2 doors down brought lunch for everyone. Bill from across the street installed extra lighting around the property. Helen called her son a sergeant with the local police, who promised to include my house in regular patrol routes for the next few weeks. By mid-afternoon, my sister Elizabeth had been informed of the situation and was booking a flight from Arizona. My fellow retired teachers had formed a schedule to ensure someone checked on me daily. My pastor had called to offer both spiritual support and the church's elder care resources. Most practically, Susan had offered her guest room until things stabilized, and her brother Alan, an estate attorney, was reviewing my will and other legal documents to ensure they couldn't be challenged. "We should be prepared for Amanda to show up," Patricia warned as we finished securing my home. "Given what you've told me about her, she won't take this resistance lying down." "I'm counting on it," I replied, feeling stronger by the hour. "But this time I'll be ready for her." We prepared for the confrontation methodically. Susan would be present as a witness. Patricia would handle any legal aspects. Michael had installed a discreet recording device with clear disclosure signage to make it legal. I had prepared what I wanted to say, rehearsing the key points to ensure emotion wouldn't override my message. As evening approached, Susan and I returned to her house, where I finally allowed myself to truly process the emotional impact of the betrayal. Sitting in her cozy living room with marmalade purring on my lap, Michael had retrieved him from my house. Along with some necessities, I let the tears flow freely. "I keep thinking about Thomas as a little boy," I confessed to Susan. "How did we get from that sweet child to this man, who would rob his own mother of her dignity and independence?" Susan sat beside me, her hand steady on mine. "People change, Charlene. Sometimes not for the better. But you haven't changed, have you? You're still the same strong woman who raised him alone after John's accident, who put hundreds of children on the right path, who volunteers even in retirement. That strength is going to get you through this, too." As we prepared for bed, my phone rang. Thomas's number flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Mom, where are you? We're worried sick." His voice sounded genuinely concerned, though I detected Amanda's voice in the background, sharp and demanding. "I'm safe, Thomas. That's all you need to know right now." "Mom, please, let's talk about this. You misunderstood what we were trying to do." His voice had the pleading quality I remembered from his teenage years, when he'd been caught breaking curfew. "I understood perfectly," I replied calmly, "and I've taken steps to protect myself." "Protect yourself? From what?" "From your family who loves you." His indignation seemed genuine, which was perhaps the most disturbing part. "Love doesn't sell someone's possessions without permission, Thomas. Love doesn't fabricate cognitive decline. Love doesn't discard a person's companion animal." My voice remained steady. "We can talk tomorrow, but not tonight." I ended the call, despite his protests, turned off my phone and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, I had done all I could to reclaim my life and dignity. Amanda arrived at my house precisely at 9 the next morning, just as we had anticipated. Through Susan's front window, we watched her park her luxury SUV directly in front of my driveway, a power move meant to block any potential escape. She emerged, looking like she was heading to a business meeting, designer handbag over one arm, tablet in hand, hair and makeup immaculate. "Ready?" Susan asked, car keys in hand. I nodded, suddenly grateful for the support surrounding me. We drove the short distance to my house, parking on the street since Amanda had blocked the driveway. As we approached, I saw her practiced smile snap into place, though it faltered slightly at the sight of Susan beside me. "Charlene? There you are." Amanda's voice carried artificial warmth. "We were so worried when you left like that. Thomas has been beside himself." I noticed she made no mention of Thomas's current whereabouts. "Good morning, Amanda," I replied evenly. "I wasn't expecting you." Her smile tightened. "I thought we could still make that tour at Sunny Pines this morning. They're expecting us at 10. She glanced at her expensive watch. "We should really get going." "I won't be touring any facility today," I said firmly. "Or any other day." Amanda's expression shifted to one of exaggerated concern. "Charlene, I understand you're upset. Change is difficult at any age, but especially for seniors. If you just give Sunny Pines a chance, I know you'd see we only want what's best for you." "Please come inside, Amanda," I said, unlocking my front door. "There are some things we need to discuss." She hesitated, clearly thrown by my calm demeanor. "We really don't have time for a lengthy discussion if we're going to make that appointment." "I've already called Sunny Pines to cancel," I informed her. "Please come in." Reluctantly, Amanda followed us inside, where Patricia was already waiting. Amanda's eyes narrowed at the sight of another unexpected person. "Who's this?" she demanded, her veneer of politeness cracking. Patricia Reynolds' attorney. Patricia introduced herself, not offering a hand. "I'm here as Charlene's legal counsel." Amanda's composure slipped further. "Legal counsel? That's ridiculous. This is a family matter." "This ceased to be merely a family matter when you and Thomas began selling my possessions without consent and making fraudulent withdrawals from my accounts," I said, gesturing to the living room. "Please sit down. I don't know what Thomas has told you, but everything was done legally with power of attorney." Amanda insisted, remaining standing. I pointed to a small sign near the entryway. "Notice audio and video recording in progress." "For transparency," I explained. "Now shall we sit and discuss this civilly, or would you prefer to leave?" Something in my calm confidence must have unsettled her, because Amanda sank onto the edge of my sofa, clutching her handbag like a shield. First, I began sitting across from her. "I've revoked any power of attorney Thomas may have had. My accounts are secured, and the police have been notified about the missing items from my home." Amanda's face flushed. "The police, Charlene? You're blowing this completely out of proportion. $5,000 in unauthorized withdrawals and the theft of family heirlooms seems quite proportionate to police involvement," Patricia interjected coolly. "Not to mention the attempted guardianship under false pretenses." "False pretenses," Amanda's voice rose. "Thomas has legitimate concerns about his mother's cognitive abilities." "Interesting," I said, considering I had a complete cognitive assessment just last month as part of my annual physical. I handed her a copy of Dr. Marshall's report, which Patricia had helped me obtain that morning. "As you can see, I scored well above average for my age group on all measures of cognitive function." Amanda barely glanced at the paper. "One test doesn't prove anything. We've witnessed concerning behavior." "Such as?" Patricia prompted. "Forgetting conversations, misplacing things, confusion about dates," Amanda rattled off vaguely. "Documented when and by whom?" Patricia pressed. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "Thomas has been keeping notes." "Notes he's never shared with his mother, the subject of his supposed concern," Patricia observed. "How convenient." I leaned forward slightly. "Amanda, I know why you're doing this." "Doing what?" "Trying to help my mother-in-law." Her indignation seemed almost convincing. "This isn't about my welfare," I said quietly. "This is about my house, my savings, and the inconvenience of having an independent mother-in-law who might need occasional support." "That's absurd," Amanda sputtered. "Is it?" I asked. "Because I spoke with your former mother-in-law this morning." The color drained from Amanda's face. "What?" "Margaret Williams. Thomas's first wife, Lindsay's mother. She had quite an interesting story about how you managed her care after her husband died. How you convinced Thomas she couldn't live alone. How you sold her house and possessions, placed her in a facility, and then rarely visited. This was the bombshell Susan and Patricia had uncovered with a few strategic phone calls the previous evening. Amanda's pattern of behavior extended beyond me. That was completely different, Amanda insisted, but her confidence was clearly shaken. It seems remarkably similar to me, I countered. And I suspect it would seem similar to Adult Protective Services and the District Attorney's Office. At the mention of potential criminal charges, Amanda's demeanor changed entirely. The mask of concern fell away, replaced by naked anger. You, ungrateful old woman, do you have any idea what it costs to maintain our lifestyle? The twins' private school, the country club membership, the summer home? We need that money. The raw truth finally exposed. Not concern for my well-being, but for their luxury lifestyle. So this was never about my safety, I said quietly. It was about using my assets to fund your wants. Thomas agreed to everything, Amanda snapped defensively. This wasn't just my idea. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the front door opened, and Thomas stepped hesitantly into the house. The surprise on his face at seeing the assembled group quickly turned to alarm. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, looking between me and Amanda. "Your wife was just explaining how you both plan to use my house and savings to fund your lifestyle," I replied calmly. "After placing me in a facility against my will, of course." Thomas's face crumpled. Unlike Amanda, my son had never been good at hiding his emotions. "Mom, it wasn't like that. Not for me, anyway. I was worried about you living alone. Worried enough to forge my signature on a power of attorney document. Worried enough to sell my jewelry. Worried enough to take my cat to a shelter." My voice remained steady despite the pain these questions caused. Thomas sank into the nearest chairhead in his hands. "I never wanted to sell your things. That was Amanda's idea. She said we needed to start liquidating assets to pay for Sunny Pines." "Stop throwing me under the bus," Amanda snapped. "You agreed to everything." "Because you convinced me Mom was declining," Thomas shot back. "You kept pointing out normal senior moments and calling them signs of dementia. You had your cousin write that assessment without ever meeting Mom." As husband and wife turned on each other, Patricia discreetly recorded their admissions. Susan placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Despite the vindication of seeing the truth exposed, watching my son's marriage implode and hearing the extent of their deception brought fresh pain. "Enough," I said finally. "This isn't productive. Here's what's going to happen now." Both Thomas and Amanda fell silent, looking at me with very different expressions. He with shame, she with barely contained fury. "I will continue living independently in my home," I stated firmly. "I will not be touring any facilities now or in the foreseeable future. I expect the return of all items removed from my house without permission or restitution for their value. The fraudulent withdrawals from my accounts will be repaid in full." I turned specifically to Thomas. "As for our relationship, that will require time and significant effort to repair, if it can be repaired at all. I suggest you begin with an honest assessment of how you've allowed yourself to be manipulated into betraying your own mother." Thomas nodded miserably, unable to meet my eyes. "To Amanda," I continued, "I have no interest in pursuing criminal charges at this time. Consider that a courtesy to my grandchildren, not to you. However, if there are any further attempts to undermine my independence or access my assets, I will not hesitate to take legal action." Amanda stood abruptly, gathering her purse and tablet. "This isn't over, Charlene." "For your sake, I hope it is," I replied evenly. "Patricia has prepared documentation of everything we've discussed today. The recording will be preserved. Any further actions against me will only strengthen potential legal cases." Amanda stormed out without another word. Thomas remained seated, looking utterly defeated. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I don't know how I let things get so far." "Neither do I answered honestly. "But that's something you'll need to figure out, Thomas. Not just for my sake, but for your own, and for Lucy and Jake." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Can I ever make this right?" I considered his question carefully. "That depends on what actions you take moving forward. Words alone won't be sufficient." As Thomas left, shoulders slumped and eyes red, I felt no triumph, only a weary resolution. The confrontation had gone as well as could be expected. Amanda's true motives had been exposed, Thomas had been forced to face his complicity, and I had maintained both my dignity and independence. But the price had been high, possibly the permanent fracturing of my relationship with my only child. As the door closed behind him, I turned to Susan and Patricia. "Thank you both," I said sincerely. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You've always been there for everyone else," Susan replied, hugging me. "It's about time someone was there for you." The days immediately following that confrontation were both empowering and heartbreaking. While I had successfully defended my independence, the breach of trust with my son left a wound that couldn't be quickly healed. I alternated between pride in standing up for myself and grief over the family relationships that had been damaged, perhaps irreparably. Amanda made several attempts to regain control of the narrative. She called mutual acquaintances, spinning tales of my stubbornness and declining health. She even approached my pastor after Sunday service, tearfully expressing concerns about my well-being. Thankfully, my support network held firm, and her manipulations gained no traction. Thomas, to his credit, began the difficult process of making amends. First came the return of my possessions. Some items had already been sold, but he repurchased what he could and provided financial compensation for the rest. The $5,000 was repaid to my account within days. Most importantly, he began attending therapy, exploring how he had allowed himself to become complicit in such a scheme. Rather than retreating into isolation after this ordeal, I channeled my experience into action. With Patricia's guidance, I joined the local chapter of Elder Rights Advocates, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing elder abuse and exploitation. My years as an educator served me well, as I helped develop an educational program about seniors' legal rights and financial protection. My first presentation at the community center drew over 60 attendees, standing at the podium, sharing my own experience. And the lessons learned, I found a new purpose emerging from the pain. The best protection, I told the audience, is knowledge, preparation, and community. No one should face these challenges alone. The twins, innocent casualties in their parents' scheme, became regular visitors to my home, often without Amanda's knowledge. Lucy and Jake would arrive with Thomas for weekend visits, and our relationship deepened in ways that might never have happened otherwise. Free from Amanda's controlling influence, they asked questions about family history, learned to bake my special apple pie, and helped tend the garden that had nearly been lost. "I like it better here than at home," Jake confided one Saturday as we planted tomato seedlings. "There's no yelling and you actually listen when I talk." Thomas watched our interactions with a mixture of guilt and hope. During these visits, I saw glimpses of the son I remembered: thoughtful, kind, remorseful. While forgiveness would be a long journey, these moments were important first steps. 6 months after the confrontation, Thomas called with news. "Amanda and I are separating," he said quietly. "I've moved into an apartment near the office." I expressed appropriate sympathy while acknowledging the complexity of my feelings. The marriage's dissolution wasn't something to celebrate, but it represented Thomas taking control of his own life again, stepping away from toxic influence. "The therapist helped me see so many patterns," he explained. "Not just with you, but with everything. How I've been surrendering my own judgment to avoid conflict. How I've let Amanda make decisions I didn't agree with because fighting seemed harder than complying." His self-awareness was encouraging. "That's an important realization," I told him. "What matters now is what you do with that knowledge." 1 year after that terrible dinner, my life had transformed in unexpected ways. My circle of friends had expanded through my advocacy work. My relationship with Thomas was slowly healing, built on new foundations of honesty and respect, rather than obligation and guilt. The twins spent every other weekend with me, bringing youthful energy and perspective to my quiet home. Most profoundly, I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The woman who walked out of that dinner without a word had been acting on instinct. The woman I became afterward was acting with purpose, helping others find their voice and protect their dignity. On a warm spring afternoon, I sat in my garden watching Lucy help her brother build a birdhouse near the flowering dogwood that had nearly been destroyed. Thomas was grilling burgers on the patio, occasionally glancing over with a tentative smile. Marmalade dozed contentedly on the bench beside me, his orange fur glowing in the sunlight. In this peaceful moment, the most valuable lesson of my ordeal became crystal clear. Dignity isn't something others can take from you, it's something you claim for yourself. Standing up to those who would diminish you isn't just self-preservation, it's self-respect. I had chosen forgiveness without forgetting compassion, without capitulation. The path forward wasn't perfect. Amanda still occasionally caused problems. Thomas still had much to prove, and I still had moments of doubt and pain. But I was walking that path on my own terms, with my independence intact and my voice heard. For anyone facing similar challenges, I hope my story offers both warning and encouragement. Prepare before crisis strikes, document everything, build a community of support, know your legal rights. But most importantly, never surrender your dignity or sense of self-worth, no matter how persuasive or persistent the pressure. As the sun began to set on my beloved garden, I smiled at the simple joy of being exactly where I belonged in my own home, surrounded by those who truly respected me, master of my own destiny. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth every difficult step. What would you do if faced with a similar situation? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against someone you loved? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Remember, your support helps more stories like mine reach those who might need to hear them. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the strength to protect your dignity even when it's hardest to do so.